Hi, I'm Dr. Aaron Anderson, and today you're going to learn about some of the amazing collaborations between arts and healthcare and business here at VCU. And you're also going to walk away with one skill that you can use right now. This is the skill that doctors use to break bad news to patients and that business leaders use to talk to shareholders in times of crisis. But first, I need to apologize for this beard, for this ridiculous mass of fur on my face. You see, I'm in a beard growing contest with some former colleagues, and it's COVID, and apparently you don't need to shave anymore. Plus, my former colleagues are all stuntmen. This is what they look like. See, before I became a professor, my first profession was as a professional fight director. What's a fight director, you ask? I'm glad you asked. It's someone who teaches actors how to sword fight, gunfight, fall downstairs, and catch on fire. Is that a real job, you ask? I'm glad you asked. Yes, it is a real job, and yes, it is as much fun as it sounds. However, there are some strange things that happen. For instance, this is what a standard Saturday night in my backyard looks like. In the stunt business, this is what we call a fire whip, because it's a whip that you catch on fire, and in the stunt business, we just call things what they are. Because why crack a regular whip when you can crack one that's on fire? I showed you that because, believe it or not, this has to do with our topic today. Let's go back to the tape for a second. Now, the eagle-eyed among you may recognize that my shirt is on fire at the end of that sequence. Now, this is perfectly safe because I was wearing a fire retardant gel. However, I did not communicate that fact to my son, who had a fire extinguisher in his hand, or my wife, who was running the camera. So let's go back to the tape. This is how it ends.
He's on fire, he's on fire. Turn around.
Before we move on, I should point out my long-suffering wife, who has to deal with me every day. You notice that my son was like, he's on fire, he's on fire. And my wife was like, turn around. As I said, this happens a lot at my house. The moral of this story is that communication is important. It also happens to be the core of all the collaborations between arts and healthcare here on this campus. Let's explain how this all started. Back in 2004, David Leong, who was then chair of the Department of Theater at VCU, read an article in the New York Magazine called A Crisis in Healthcare. That article pointed out that a number of studies had shown that doctors were getting so bad at communicating that patients were actually getting sicker as a result. David went to Dr. Richard Wenzel, who was then the chair of the Department of Internal Medicine at VCU, and said, is this true? And Dr. Wenzel said, oh, God, yes, it's true. What's happened is technology has just gotten so advanced that it's squeezed all the training in humanities out of the medical curriculum. You see, you only have 4 years to train a doctor, and there's only so much you can squeeze into that time. And then it had been so bad that there really wasn't even anyone else around to teach it. Now, David recognized that in theater, you don't actually teach people to act. You teach them to listen, because most actors already know what the other person is going to say. They've read the script. So teaching someone how to act is actually teaching them how to listen as if for the first time. And Dr. Wenzel said, that's wonderful. Could you teach our residents that? And David said, I think so. And Dr. Wenzel said, we need to study that. And so I was brought in as a researcher in the Department of Theater, and Dr. Alan Dow in the Department of Internal Medicine, he was then chief resident, was brought in, and we conducted a large-scale study. So we did the training and conducted the study, and it turns out it's not rocket science. If you train people in something, they get better at it. So all the doctors did, in fact, get better at it, and patients were able to recognize those differences. We published that study in the Journal of General Internal Medicine, which is a prestigious medical journal, and it in turn led to more grants and more studies. We then conducted more and more work with the departments of surgery, nursing, hematology, oncology, palliative care, allied health, and pretty much every other department in the School of Medicine. So then a journalist at the Washington Post read some of that research and wrote an article in the Post about us. Now, I tell my mother it was because it was such a good study, but in fact, it's just that actors teach doctors communication is a pretty good headline. And then that article led to more and more articles, such as in NPR, Voice of America, USA Today, US News and World Report, the Chicago Tribune, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the San Francisco Chronicle, Forbes.com, and about 200 other journal articles and news outlets around the world. USA Today also named the stories about us one of the 10 most emailed health-related stories of 2008. So we got that going for us. Now, all that press caught the eye of some CEOs of some large companies. In particular, the CEO of Hamilton Beach Brands gave me a call. Now, he probably made your toaster or your blender. Well, not him personally, but people who work for him. And he asked me, I love this thing that you're doing with doctors. Do you also do that with business people? Now, I had never worked with business people before, but in the theater, you learn to say yes. So when he said, I love that work, do you do it with business people? I said, absolutely we do. And so we started working with Hamilton Beach Brands and then hundreds of companies around the world. This in turn led to the founding of Studio B in VCU's School of Business and a required class called Winning Presentations and a university-wide contest called the Creative Communication Competition, where we invite business leaders to help coach our students in business presentations and give prizes to them. Here's a quick video promo that we did about that competition. Several years ago, a number of businesses talked to the School of Business here at VCU and said what they would really like is for the people who are graduating from the School of Business to be better at giving presentations. So we started this competition as a way of putting the learning in the hands of the students so that they could engage with giving presentations in a way that mattered and was energetic.
I've always been aware of some of the issues I've had related to public speaking, and through this competition, I'm able to get mentorship and advice and, really quick feedback about those things. So long term, I can kind of always keep them in the back of my mind of just knowing, hey, I struggle with this, and because of this competition, I'm able to work on it in a very safe and supportive environment, and that's just an awesome experience.
Well, I've always been a shy, introverted type of guy my whole life. But I realized that it's really the social skills that get you ahead. So you can work on hard skills like math and science as much as you want, but at the end of the day, it's really the connections you make with other people that matter and what get you ahead.
Learning more, expanding my knowledge and my experience in presentation. It's a good skill for life, not just for school.
This just makes me proud to be part of VCU, to have been a part of this, and to watch what the students are doing. They are going to bring this lesson forward and make their job better, make their life better, and make the world a better place.
If I've had an idea and I've been using it and then it gets tweaked, I gotta quickly change up on it almost immediately. So that's a little hard, but it's fun.
I did this to step out of my comfort zone, to take on a challenge and to do something different, and this is by all metrics doing just that. So it's a great experience, it's a learning experience, and there's inevitably going to be a point in my career where someone says, this is a room full of people that don't know the facts, this is a room full of people that don't have the background that you have, and you're going to need to tell them a story if you want to get your point across.
So I really liked the feedback part. It was really good. It helped me to make everything more short, more concise, and a better presenter.
So after the first round of the competition, it's like night and day at this point, honestly. Feeling very shaky before when I was, just arriving this morning. Very nervous right before I went in and actually did it, but now that it's over, I feel very confident. I hope I make it into the final round because I think I would do even better than I did initially.
Now that the first round is over, I feel really good, actually. A lot of stress relief.
So what you saw today was the culmination of 25 hours of work by these students.
I'm just gonna replicate what I did before, and we're gonna do our best, and that's all we can ask.
In first place, Giovanni Knight.
3 years of trying. I feel very accomplished. I've been working for the past 3 years trying to reach this point, so to be able to polish my skills now and have it result in a victory feels amazing.
And I just can't wait to compete next year and do it all over again.
Meanwhile, back on the health campus, I applied for and received what was then called a PRIP grant, which was a presidential award for research. And Dr. Alan Dow and I conducted some research that then became the foundation of what became the Standardized Patient Program. In 2011, Dr. Ellen Brock helped found that program, the Standardized Patient Program, in the Center for Human Simulation and Patient Safety. And this is where I have to give a quick shout out. Dr. Ellen Brock is one of my heroes. She's the best leader I've ever worked with, and none of this would have been possible without her, so I just want that on the record. The Standardized Patient Program conducts training for every level of learner on the medical campus and is the primary method through which we teach interpersonal communication to medical learners. Anyway, to keep things simple, here's a quick promo we did about that program.
So this all started a long time ago, about a decade ago. Standardized patients are actors that you train to pretend to be patients, perform the role of patients so that doctors can practice communicating with them, can practice diagnosing them, and can practice doing physical exams on them.
We started the Center for Human Simulation and Patient Safety in the School of Medicine. We knew that ultimately we wanted to have a standardized patient cohort associated with the simulation resources that we were building.
It became clear over time, working with all these different areas, that the school, the university, really needed a standardized patient program of their own that they could control.
I had no idea I would be given the opportunity to work with the medical school in any capacity. And the standardized patient program really provided that opportunity for me to be able to deal with doctors and even have to provide them with feedback and train them to improve their experience with patients.
Many of the things that we do as physicians involve human interactions. Many academic institutions now have their own standardized patient programs. Not many of them use actors.
Whatever ailment or symptom I'm given as a standardized patient, I have to make sure that I am convincing and even make it difficult and challenging for the doctors.
And we are really one of the few programs to grow out of a collaboration specifically with the theater department.
We now have 65 actors, standardized patients, 2 full-time people, $300,000 annual budget, and we conduct training for nearly every aspect of the School of Medicine.
These connections paved the way for many more interdisciplinary collaborations across the university, including surgery and sculpture, otolaryngology and music, graphic design and women's community health, gerontology and theater, and in this, Dr. Tracy Gendron deserves a special shout out as a force of good at this university. And of course, Sterling Hundley, who became the first artist in residence in the School of Medicine. And speaking of my heroes, one of the most important players at the university in arts and health has been the Pollock Society's own Dr. John Nessler. He has 100% taken all of these collaborations and more and brought them all to the next level. Dr. Nessler is the reason that VCU is on the national stage right now. Here's Dr. Nessler explaining about some of the more recent collaborations that he's been a part of.
You've done a lot of work with arts and health over the last few years. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about arts and health collaborations of note within the schools. And I'm wondering if can you give just an overview of some of the collaborations, some of the more noteworthy collaborations that you've been a part of recently?
Sure. And there are, as you know, there are many collaborations. But one I'd like to highlight is one I have with John Blatter and Jill Ware. They have a virtual reality setup where you literally become another person. And they use this in a funded research study with me to teach medical students what it's like to be an old person. So we took medical students and we put the VR on them, and we use a lot of sensory manipulations as well. They will have lead anklets, and they'll be strapped with a rubber band to a chair, so they have difficulty getting out of a chair, difficulty walking. And because of the virtual reality headwear that they're using, when they look at their hands, it's an old person's hands. When they look at their feet, they have entered the body of an old person. And actually, John and Jill went to a retirement home and interviewed individuals there and took one individual who became the prototype for all the students. And so we took the students and they went through a session like this. There was another group of students who saw the same content, but they saw it on a television. So the question was, does the medium make a difference as to how medical students will be affected by the information they saw? And we used some standardized surveys to try to figure this all out. And indeed, the students who went through the VR experience, the embodiment experience, exhibited a lot more empathy, a much better, and the empathy was the greatest increase that they saw, an increased understanding and appreciation for the frailty of the elderly. Now, John and Jill have taken this and gone into other realms. They've done it with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, where they created an embodiment scenario for the caretakers, for the spouses and loved ones of people with ALS, so that they could become the patient and see what their loved one is experiencing, which was very powerful, so that they could appreciate the trials and tribulations of their loved one and develop more empathy. They've been using it to mimic epilepsy, so that medical students can see what is it like to have an epileptic fit. And if you think about it, there's just a million possible uses for something like this. And they're continuing their work so that we can see, do these changes that come about through the VR embodiment experience, do they last throughout medical school? Do they affect the type of physician that these medical students become? Do they become kinder, more empathetic, more humanistic in their approach to medicine?
That's very exciting. And I know that they're also working with Dr. Sifu with the VA at the moment.
That's right, that's right. Dr. Sifu has a large grant for people who have been injured, traumatic brain injury, and I believe that they're going to see how that can be used in that arena as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you for your time, John. I appreciate it. I'll see you at the meeting.
Okay, Aaron. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Another outstanding example of arts and health at VCU has been Dr. Semi Rue's work with virtual puppetry. Here's someone who's directly benefited from this work to explain more.
My name is Connie Cole. I'm 86 years old and thankful for that. Because it's a caricature there, it was easier for me to talk. There is still the personal part of the story, but whoever sees it can benefit from it. I just think it's wonderful to be able to remember back and know that your memories have value for someone other than yourself. All of us live here together, but we all came from different backgrounds, different experiences. When you put them all together, our voices and our stories blend beautifully.
I said it's mine.
Another exciting current collaboration has been with the Sheltering Arms Institute. Here are two of the key players to talk a little bit about that.
You've been doing some interesting collaborations. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yes, we have been doing some amazing collaborations this last year with the Sheltering Arms Institute. It has been such an exciting year where the Center for Interprofessional Education and Sheltering Arms Institute has come together to utilize the art of improv to practice team-based care. The really cool thing about improv is it actually goes beyond the stage, beyond the realm of entertainment and this sort of platform for just actors and comedians, but actually improv at its core is all about acceptance and co-collaboration, trust and supporting others. And so when you kind of take those principles, they actually align really nicely with IPE. So here we are, we are just about to start our second pilot at Sheltering Arms Institute in like a month. And it's so exciting because what better place for us to now take all of this awesome improv work that we've been doing and now begin placing it in an environment where we have emerging leaders and other future and current healthcare workers. So we're really excited about that.
Absolutely. And as we were shopping for a method to try to make sure that our team members at Sheltering Arms Institute from every discipline, nursing, therapies, chaplain, psychology, we wanted to make sure that folks had the opportunity to really practice those team-based skills using the core competencies that we know are effective for interprofessional education. And interprofessional education in healthcare is where you take folks who've been trained up in each one of their disciplines, but then you bring them together to learn with one another, to learn about one another, and to learn from one another. And so this was a great platform to really encourage folks to not just sit and passively receive this information, but to take those concepts, to take some risks in real time with their real team to develop those fantastic teaming skills. So EB was a fantastic collaborator, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of what our research will allow us to know about how effective this has been, not just improving our team dynamics, but ultimately helping our patients reach the best possible outcomes.
Improving with improv, right?
That's right. And IPE, all the I's, right? And SAI.
Perfect.
We also continue to do research and publish the findings. Here's Dr. Kathy Grossman to talk about some of the more potentially significant research that's being done right now.
Dr. Grossman, how are you doing today?
I am well. Aaron, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for taking time to talk to me.
No problem.
I was wondering if you could fill me in a little bit, just sort of an overview of the work you were doing with improv.
Sure. So we did a novel thing where we used improv to teach the micro skills of empathetic listening. So you may be asking yourself, what do you mean by micro skills, Dr. Grossman? Well, a lot of times when we break down a big task, like say it's putting in an IV or a central line, we break it down into small components. And when we started thinking about how do we break down communication into small teachable skills, improv came directly to mind because the different games can focus on different techniques for communication. So we sought to go after three big things in empathetic communication: active listening, active observation of both physical cues and body language, as well as how patients were talking in terms of tone of voice, paralanguage, etc. And then the ability to paraphrase to show that you understand what the patient has told you. So we picked three games to target these three skills. And what we did with a group of just rising third-year medical students was randomize half the class to get a 45-minute improv intervention, which consisted of playing three games to teach micro skills of communication, but they were followed up with debriefing questions and conversation starters that were meant to tie this into not just being a silly game, but into how do I translate this into patient care. And then to do it again, so they got to practice it at least once and learn from what they had done the first time. And then use these three games to really try to bring home ideas of different aspects of empathetic communication in regards to patient-centered communication. So group is randomized, half does it, half doesn't. We send them into a standardized patient encounter in groups, and we have the standardized patients as surrogate patients measure the empathetic communication of the groups, as well as the patient satisfaction scores, just like anybody would in the hospital. We all get those surveys from every doctor visit and hospitalization now. And what we found is that the group who underwent the improv intervention had different levels of higher empathetic listening, as well as they had higher patient satisfaction scores with a 45-minute intervention that was all just gameplay.
That's
fantastic. Isn't that cool? Yeah.
That is really great. So it worked. So the idea
that
that
worked, it worked in medical students and with standardized patients. Yes, if I narrow it down, it worked. Yes.
That's fantastic. And this is being written up for publication?
Being written up for publication. Yep.
And it's one of
we presented it at a couple conferences, and people have really loved the idea of it and just the translation into everyday medical practice.
And it's my understanding that improv use in medical encounters is becoming a growing area of research, and the VCU is one of the few universities that are doing research in this area.
I think that's true. I mean, I think a lot of people are on the ground, are on the ground of this, like, groundbreaking stuff. There's a better word for this here that you can easily, hopefully edit in, but real work.
Well, why don't you go get the real work, and I appreciate it.
Great, sounds good.
All right, go do the life-saving thing. Thank you so much.
No.
No patients were harmed as a result of making this video. That beeper going off is a reminder that this work doesn't just take place at the medical school. It takes place at the hospital itself and directly impacts patient care. As a matter of fact, I promised you a skill. Before we do that, let me give you a little story to explain why it's important. For the past several years, I've been one of the people teaching fellows in hematology, oncology, and palliative care how to break bad news to patients. Now, I started doing this work with Dr. Lori Lickham, who's one of the best palliative care people I've ever met in my entire life. And one day she called me and asked if I would do this training on my own. And I, of course, being in the theater, said, yes, absolutely I will. Now, when I got to the room, there was a room full of doctors, and they were all looking at me. And these are doctors. These are not medical students. These are fellows. They've been to medical school, and they're practicing every day. So I asked, by way of starting the training, I know that you have to break bad news in your practice. How often do you have to do it? And one of the doctors looked at me, and she raised her hand and said she'd had to do it 5 times that morning. This is 9:30 a.m. By 9:30 a.m., that doctor had to tell 5 people and their families that life was never going to get better. Now, I don't know if you've ever felt like a fraud before, but if you have, I want you to take that and magnify it 1,000,000 times, because I have never told anyone that they were going to die. And if I do tell you, go get a second opinion, because I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. But she and the other doctors in that room weren't asking about the medicine. They understood about the medicine. What they were asking were very human questions. Where do I sit? Where do I look? What do I do with my hands? What happens if I cry? And so I told them everything that I know from theater, from working in theater, from how human interaction works, and the skills that I've been working with Dr. Lori Lickham on. And then later that day, this training lasted for about an hour. And later that day, I was in the hospital, still in the hospital, and that doctor came down the hallway, running down the hallway, and I'll never forget it. It was like a scene from a movie on the Oprah network. And she said, Dr. Anderson, I want you to know that I had to talk with 5 more families after we met, and that those interactions were fundamentally better. Now, she didn't mean that the patients were getting better. Those patients were never getting better. What she meant was the interactions were easier, they were more fruitful, that they were more soothing for the patients. Now, what you have to understand is that nobody goes into the arts for money. If you are thinking about going into the arts for money, I hate to be the one to break it to you, but there is no money in the arts. The reason you go into the arts is because you think, if I do this right, something inside me will touch something inside the audience, and they will walk away and they will be better in some way. Now, when I was a professional actor, I was fine, at least I thought I was fine, but I never had that much impact. In 1 hour of work, I was able to fundamentally change the lives of 5 people or 5 families on the worst day of their life. And everyone else that that doctor will talk to, and everyone else that all the rest of the doctors in that room will talk to. What you have to understand is that this is why we do art. This is the reason we do art, in order to make a difference in people's lives. And in 1 hour of using theater in healthcare, I was able to make more of a difference than I ever have as an actor or as a fight director. This is why we do interdisciplinary collaborations. This is why VCU is the best place in the world to be right now. Are you ready to learn the skill that we taught those doctors that was so effective? Here it is. But first, the thing you need to understand is that difficult medical conversations are structurally no different than any other kind of conversation. It's just that the stakes are so high that the effect of any mistake can be catastrophic. So you have to make sure that you pay attention to each and every element in this following protocol. This is pre-spikes. This is the acronym we use to help remember all the things we need to pay attention to during difficult conversations. Pre is the moment before. That's paying attention to the fact that you are about to have a difficult conversation and not to bring other things into the room with you. S is setting. That's paying attention to your environment and where you sit, where you look, what you do with your hands. P is perception. We're going to talk about that more in a moment. I is immediate concerns. That's dealing with thirst, pain, fear, anything that's up front and is going to get in the way of other conversations. K is knowledge. The protocol in the United States is clear, concise, and unambiguous. In the United States, you use the word death, you use the word cancer. That is not true in Asia and other places. E is empathy. Empathy is recognizing and responding to the emotional cues that happen in the moment. And finally, S is second touch. That's recognizing that no single conversation is going to convey all the information you need. Recognize that these conversations will take place over a period of time. The P in our mnemonic is the most important part. That stands for perception. This reminds us to always ask what the patient already knows or understands before we tell them any news. Let me explain what I mean by this. Imagine there are 2 different conversations about a positive HIV test. Now you go into one patient and you say, what's your understanding of the HIV virus? And that patient says, well, that's that AIDS thing. Only homosexuals and drug users get that. And I'm not a homosexual or a drug user. What are you trying to say? Now that conversation is going to go one way. There's going to be a lot of education, and you're going to have to use a lot of words that are not jargony. You're going to have to explain things in simple terms. Imagine those same facts, positive HIV test, and you walk in, you ask the patient, what's your understanding of the HIV virus? And that patient says, my partner's been HIV positive for 10 years, and I'm afraid I am too. That's an entirely different conversation. You are going to be able to use jargon. That patient has a sophisticated understanding of everything that's going on and already has fears that you can acknowledge and respond to. Same facts, two entirely different conversations. You won't know what conversation you're in until you ask. This is one of the most important keys in difficult conversations in healthcare. It's also absolutely one of the most essential keys in any conversation about anything that has any emotional content. Let me explain what I mean. For example, my oldest son knows exactly the moment his childhood ended. And that was the day his mother told him that there was no such thing as Santa Claus. Now, before you judge my wife too harshly, what you have to understand is that my son came home and said, Mommy, are you and Daddy really Santa Claus? And my wife had sworn to herself that she would always tell our children the truth. So she said, yes, that's right. Mommy and Daddy are Santa Claus. And my son went, what? And he burst into tears and he ran into his room and he stayed in his room crying for nearly 3 days. Now, if that conversation had gone the other way, if my wife had had the training that you now have and had known this skill, that conversation would have gone like this. Mommy, are you and Daddy really Santa Claus? And she'd have said, what do you think, honey? And he'd have said, well, some boys at school said that, but I don't believe them because I'm young and innocent and I want my innocence to continue going on and I want there to be sweetness and magic and light in the world. And she would say, I want that too. Here's a cookie. You see how these two different conversations are very, very important. They meet at this place where you ask first. I promise you, I swear to you, if your next conversation, if it has any emotional content at all, simply ask, what do you already know about this? Or what do you think about this? That sheer act of asking will make all the difference in the world. It will tell you how to move forward with the rest of the conversation. It is absolutely one of the most fundamental skills you can use. Doctors use it when they break bad news. Business leaders should use it when they're talking with stakeholders about important or life-changing events. Ask before you tell. I promise you it will make your life better. Okay. So before we go on, I'm going to leave you with one more picture of the fire whip, only because it's cool, and then I'll see you in a minute.